Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 91.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA departure 123.9.
Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 409 in Tampa, Florida. In this episode, the new FAA Portable Electronic Device ruling, a new final rule on pilot training, a 23-year-old nutcase causes havoc at Los Angeles International, more news and feedback. So, get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 91 is ready for pushback. Sorry, I stumbled on that one because I still had 90 in my show notes, or my intro notes, or script, or whatever you want to call it. Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. If this is your first time here, I'd like to apologize. It's probably going to be boring and tedious and so many other awful things. But hey, just hang in there. You might find it entertaining at least. Look at this poor, pathetic major airline legacy captain guy spouting off his opinions about this, that, and the other. But hey, I don't know. A lot of people seem to like it, so maybe you will too. So first thing we would need to do is talk about the Coffee Fund. So let me play my Coffee Fund music over here. I sped it up a little bit. Wait a minute. I think the ink spots have had too much coffee. I love coffee. I love tea. I love the Java Jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. All right. Sweet and hot. Whoops, Mr. Moto, I'm a coffee pot. I'll turn that down a little bit here. Okay, now it says for me to go over here to this page and acknowledge all of the fine people who have contributed to my Coffee Fund. And if you want to know more about the Coffee Fund, or listen to some of my earlier episodes, but just basically, it helps offset some of the costs of doing this podcast, hosting fees, media serving fees, and of course, buys me coffee, which I need to stay awake, to provide safe transportation for the public, and then after hours to help me settle down from all the hair-raising events of my airline pilot life. I use my Coffee Fund to buy beer and wine and other fine beverages. So if you'd like to contribute to my delinquency, then hit the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee little sticker thing, tab, what's that thing called? Button on my website. And you too can feel like you've made a contribution to the show. Because, you know, the show is not just about me. It's about you as well. In fact, if it weren't for you, watchers and listeners, and sending me feedback, I wouldn't have a show. I'd be finished talking about stuff a long, long time ago. So, here, let me fade that out because it's probably been playing way too long. Anyway, Coffee Fund contributors since the last show. We have Stephanie, Kenneth, Anthony, Mary, and Jeff. Thank you, one and all, for your contributions. And again, if you want to make a contribution yourself, just head over to my website, Airline Pilot Guy, and look for the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee button. All right, so we have that out of the way. And let me get over here and see what else I want to talk about. Oh, yeah, podcast awards. I think I talked about this on the last show. Starting November 1st, the podcast award voting began, and you can vote one time every day per email account. And I don't know how they're policing that. If it looks for the same IP address, so maybe you should only use one. I'm not encouraging you to cheat at all, mind you. But anyway, you can vote once per day by going to podcastawards.com. That's www.podcastawards.com. The link will be in the show notes, and hopefully I will actually write out the link appropriately and not misspell it. And there you can vote for your favorite podcasts in many, many different categories. Now, my podcast is in the general category because it's probably just the best place for it to be. Thank you again for all those who nominated my podcast, and thank you very much for those who are continuing to vote for the Airline Pilot Guy podcast. It'd be fantastic to win the award and head over to Las Vegas in January and actually pick up my award in person and maybe meet some new people and gain some more community members. Who knows? So check that out. Again, podcastawards.com. Thank you for considering voting for the Airline Pilot Guy. And remember, vote early, vote often. Thank you. All right. And let's see. Oh, have some loose ends to be tied up, or loose strings, or whatever you want to call it. That I mentioned a few episodes back that the local police authorities were thinking about charging the firefighter crash rescue vehicle driver at that Asiana crash at San Francisco International Airport. You'll remember that this worker ended up running over the Chinese teenager and actually killing her. She was still alive. And I thought that was a horrible thing, that they would actually bring her up on charges. But she was just out there trying to do her job and rescue people. And thankfully, they decided not to charge the person involved. So that's good. Good news. And let's see, what else? I was in Boston on the weekend of October 19th, 20th, 21st for the Catholic New Media Conference put on by the StarQuest Production Network and the Archdiocese of Boston. And I wasn't able to watch the race, the Sprint Cup NASCAR race. Many of you know that I kind of like, I sort of follow Sprint Cup, well, all of NASCAR racing actually, and it's kind of one of those things I like to watch occasionally if I happen to be home. And one of the big races is the Talladega race, and they had it that weekend. I didn't get to watch it. Somebody sent me some feedback regarding the fact that I think it was Super Dave sent me some feedback regarding that, saying, hey, Jamie McMurray, one of the Sprint Cup drivers, is going to be driving a car that has Auburn University displayed on it, and also Cessna. So I guess, I don't know if they're connected or not, but Auburn University has a great aviation program. I'm a graduate of that program, aviation management degree. 1981 is when I graduated from Auburn University. War Eagle. And Jamie McMurray's car had Auburn University on it and Cessna Aviation all over it. And guess what? He won the race at Talladega. So is it coincidence? I don't think so. So just thought I'd mention that. Okay, so that is probably enough for my intro. Let's get on with this little sound clip.
Captain Jeff. It's Tex from Houston. I called about the Bluetooth on my Samsung Galaxy S4 phone.
And I said mistakenly that it was Brian in Houston, and I was wrong. So Tex called in to straighten that out.
Not turning off in airplane mode. And so I went back after your comments and tried it again. In fact, what I did is I put on my Bluetooth headset, turned on your podcast, and listened to your wonderful podcast, and said, okay, let's see if I turn on airplane mode, if I lose my Bluetooth connection to my headset, if I can still listen to Captain Jeff. And fortunately for you, I could. Tried it 3 different ways, and airplane mode never turned off Bluetooth. So just a word of warning out there: airplane mode is not turning off Bluetooth on devices. Thought that was interesting, and it's not a fat finger where I turned it back on afterwards, because I did try it multiple times. Talk to you later. Bye.
You had your electronic device turned on in an airplane? Your Bluetooth? You know what could happen? Yeah. Bad things can happen when you use electronic devices on an airplane. Hey, I got this other piece of feedback from Ben. He said, "Hi, Captain Jeff. Just wanted to ask you a quick question regarding electronic devices during takeoff and landing. In episode 86, you were talking about phones and tablets and the effect it could have on the aircraft. But what about cameras? I've seen many videos on YouTube of takeoffs and landings when all electronic devices should be off. So, do they really have an effect on the aircraft? If not, why are they not allowed during takeoff and landing?" Well, Ben, that's a good question. And guess what? The FAA, after much deliberation, announced on October 31st, Halloween, All Hallows Eve, that the U.S. Department of Transportation's Federal Aviation Administration Administrator Michael Huerta today announced that the FAA has determined that airlines can safely expand passenger use of portable electronic devices during all phases of flight and is immediately providing the airlines with implementation guidance. And all I can say about that is, yay. It's about time, right, huh? What have I been saying for so long? I'm saying that electronic devices have no effect on anything. Now, you're wondering about the cell phone signals and all that kind of stuff. Well, technically, you may use your smartphones and your tablet devices, not your laptop computer, nothing bigger than a tablet, during all phases of flight, from gate to gate. But once the front door is closed, you are supposed to turn off your cellular antenna, go into airplane mode. Okay? Now, how are flight attendants going to figure out who actually has their cell antenna on and they're texting somebody, or they're just playing a game, or they're just reading their book? They can't unless they go up to each person and look to see what they're doing. But you know what? You and I know for probably a few years now that every single flight before this ruling came out, every single flight, there were dozens of smartphones and tablet devices and laptop computers with their Wi-Fi antennas on. All this stuff was happening. It has been happening all along. And no, as I've said many, many times, my opinion has no effect whatsoever. Okay? So finally, I feel like I can say, I told you so. So wanted to get that out of my system. So let me read a little bit more from this press release from the FAA. The FAA based its decision on input from a group of experts that included representatives from the airlines, aviation manufacturers, passengers, pilots, flight attendants, and the mobile technology industry. Passengers will eventually be able to read ebooks, play games, watch videos on their devices during all phases of flight with very limited exceptions. Okay, now they said eventually, well, some airlines have already implemented this new policy, Acme being one of them. In fact, I was flying on Friday, and when I signed in for my trip, I saw a bulletin that basically said, stand by for the implementation switch to be thrown on to the on position, because we're very close. We've submitted our application to the FAA this morning, and we expect to hear something back very, very soon. JetBlue Airlines was another airline. Both JetBlue and Acme had their applications in. Oh, and another airline. I have some friends that fly for them, Delta, I think. Anyway, they had all their applications in, and we received on my flight plan. I flew down from Atlanta to Miami, and then before I left for Miami, on my flight plan, I had a flight plan alert that said the new policy is effective immediately. So basically the day after the FAA put out the press release implementing the new policy, my airline was already implementing the new policy. So very cool. And you know what? I flew, a total of 6 flights on that 2-day trip and didn't have any anomalies. The airplane didn't crash. I'm on a 4-day trip right now, day 3 of a 4-day, and guess what? No, I'm still here. Look. See, I have not crashed. I didn't have any gross navigational errors. I didn't have any problems whatsoever. Huh. Imagine that. All right. Yeah, I know. Enough of that, Captain Jeff. All right, to bring you down a little bit, you saw this last week, November 1st, or maybe that was Halloween Day as well. But anyway, sometime last weekend, a man armed with what police say was an assault rifle and carrying materials expressing anti-government sentiment opened fire Friday morning. Yeah, it was last Friday at Los Angeles International Airport, killing one person, a TSA agent, before being chased down himself. And he is now in custody, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to give him any notoriety, but basically this guy is a 23-year-old nutcase who thinks that the government has some kind of a sinister plan to take over the world, or I don't know what's, I'm not sure what his philosophy is, but apparently he is not mentally stable, apparently, and he decided that the way to fix all this is to grab an assault rifle and go shooting people. Now, the TSA is looking for ways to keep this from happening, but you know what? Honestly, we live in a time where you just have to take the risk. I mean, there's no way you could possibly prevent something like this from happening. We go into big stadiums, we go to sporting events, and the Boston Marathon, go to football games, baseball games, basketball games, large gatherings, soccer, European, non-American football games. I want to make sure I say that correctly. You get the idea. We're out in the public. If you're out in the public, there's a chance that there's going to be some knucklehead kook out there that thinks that killing people is the way to solve problems, and there's nothing we can do about it. So that's just the sad fact, I believe. But they are looking at ways to have some kind of a pre-security screening patrol to prevent somebody like this nut from getting to the security line. They're also looking at possibly giving TSA agents police powers and allowing them to carry weapons. I don't think that's a good idea at all. But let the debate rage on, and who knows what they'll come up with. So just wanted to talk about that. And let's see. Oh, FAA again in the news regarding their final ruling on pilot training. This all stems from the effort by a group that got together, families and friends of those who lost their lives on the Colgan crash approaching Buffalo back in, 2009? Colgan 3407, I believe. Yes, 2009. And so as part of its ongoing effort to enhance safety and put the best qualified and trained pilots in the flight decks of U.S. airlines, or airplanes. The Department of Transportation's Federal Aviation Administration today issued a final rule that will significantly advance the way commercial air carrier pilots are trained. In addition, FAA Administrator Michael Huerta is inviting the nation's commercial aviation safety leaders to Washington, D.C. on November 21st to discuss additional voluntary steps that can be taken to further boost safety during airline operations, including pilot training. And the final rule stems in part from the tragic crash of Colgan 3407, February 2009, and addresses a congressional mandate in the Airline Safety and Federal Aviation Administration Extension Act of 2010 to ensure enhanced pilot training. Today's rule is one of several rulemakings required by the Act, including the requirements to prevent pilot fatigue that were finalized in December 2011 and, by the way, go into effect basically at the beginning of next year. January 4th, I think, is exactly the date that all those new fatigue rules will go into effect, and we'll talk about that on future podcasts and how that's going to affect schedules and that kind of thing. I'll give you a first-hand update on how that all affects at least the scheduling and flying at my airline, Acme. Let's see. So this final rule requires that ground and flight training that enables pilots to prevent and recover from aircraft stalls and upsets. These new training standards will impact future simulator standards as well. Air carriers to use data to track remedial training for pilots with performance deficiencies, such as failing a proficiency check or unsatisfactory performance during flight training. Wow. My tongue is not working very well here today. Sorry, my mouth. Training for more effective pilot monitoring, enhanced runway safety procedures, expanded crosswind training, including training for wind gusts. Some of the things that weren't talked about here in this press release. By the way, I'll have the actual final rule link to that in the show notes. It's called FAA Pilot Training Rules.pdf. And you can read the full rule and all the things they want to have happen and at what point. A lot of these things are going to be implemented within 5 years, some of them immediately as soon as this rule is effective, which it's effective now. One of the things that wasn't mentioned in this press release is the emphasis and training on manual flying of instrument approaches and departures. Hey, you know how I feel about manual flying. Let's see, what else? Crosswind training, including gusts. I think I just read that one, didn't I? Yeah. Anyway, lots of good stuff in there. So a lot of this stuff is going to be implemented in your air carrier training, pilot training program. So that's good news. So we'll talk more about all these implementations in the future, but just want to say thank you, FAA, for coming out with these new standards. And we need to put more emphasis on actually knowing how to fly airplanes and not just push buttons. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, this is odd. Did you hear about this? In Nashville, Tennessee, authorities struggled to explain how a small plane crashed at their international airport, erupted in fire, but evidently went unnoticed for several hours. A single-engine Cessna, I believe it was a 172, which is registered to the Windsor Flying Club in Ontario, Canada, evidently crashed sometime after 3 a.m. local time, according to the NTSB, but it wasn't noticed until well after sunrise when another plane taxiing for takeoffs saw an engine cover on the edge of runway 2 center, the middle of the 3 parallel runways. Controllers contacted airport personnel who found the fire-scarred wreckage. The plane's sole occupant was dead. Now, they're wondering how it was that this person was able to land their airplane at this large international airport without talking to anybody and without anybody in the tower seeing this. Now, to be fair, the weather at the time was pretty pretty gnarly. Very low visibility. In fact, some reports say the visibility was nil, which means that you couldn't see your hand if you held it out in front of you. So it was very, very foggy. And let's see what else. Oh, I found this from AvWeb, and a Canadian newspaper is reporting that the pilot of a Cessna 172 who died in unusual circumstances in a crash at Nashville International Airport early Tuesday has the same name as a convicted bank robber and facing recent pornography charges. I think child pornography charges, I believe, who said he was embarking on a 30-minute flight from just out in Windsor, Canada, which is just across from Detroit, Michigan, and he was going to take a 30-minute flight to Pele Island, but apparently never landed there and just continued into the United States and crashed about 500 miles from Pele Island. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, so give me a break if I'm not. And then attempted to land at Nashville, and obviously crashed and killed himself. Let's see. And then I saw another article about, is this a loophole? Some kind of a security loophole that we have here, that airplanes can just come in from foreign countries without being noticed. And they can. And I'll tell you that it doesn't seem that, at least it doesn't seem that way, that the air defense system is very strong with our border with Canada. But, Canada, not a lot of ne'er-do-wells come over the border from Canada, as far as I know. But there is kind of a loophole. If you file a VFR flight plan, or don't file a flight plan at all, and you're flying under visual flight rules, you can pretty much fly anywhere you want. And if you're not talking on a radio or making people aware of where you are, and you're flying low enough to avoid radar coverage, guess what? Nobody's going to know you're there unless you happen to be flying right over the top of their head. This was an article interviewing the former Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Transportation, Mary, I think it's pronounced Galvo. She says, in fact, on any given day, most of the aviation in the United States of America is not being tracked by air traffic control. Now, I don't know if that's true. Most of the aviation in the United States is not being tracked? Well, I guess that could be. And said that the air traffic controllers are on skeleton crews overnight, and pilots of small planes can choose not to radio the tower. Now, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Miss Scalvo here, that the media person interviewing her somehow put two separate things together, because she's saying air traffic controllers are on skeleton crews overnight. That's true. Lower staffing levels because it's not that busy at night. And then pilots of small planes can choose not to radio the tower. Well, I'm sure she didn't utter that in the same sentence, or at least I hope not. Yeah, if you go to an airport that has an uncontrolled, if it's an uncontrolled airport, doesn't have a control tower, you don't need to use the radio. Now, there are circumstances where you still need to make radio calls and that kind of thing. And I'm not going to go into all the different airspace classifications and where you need to have a transponder and a altitude encoding transponder, and which places you have to have a radio. But yeah, there are a lot of places around this world that you can fly an airplane and never talk on the radio. In fact, you don't even have to have a radio on your airplane. So, that's sort of true, that statement there. That kind of caught my eye. And then the last thing I'll read from Ms. Giavo is, if you choose to be off-grid and not tell anyone where you are, it's actually quite easy to fly undetected through the United States, thereby encouraging many, many terrorists, I guess. All right, so enough of that one. So they're still investigating how it is that this airplane crashed at Nashville, and nobody seemed to notice. Finally, this one kind of concerns me a little bit. Is this a possible terrorist attempt or a dry run? I've mentioned before, many people say that there are dry runs happening all the time, and this may be it. Andrew Vaughn, let's see, writes, let's see, what publication? I don't see it. Oh, the Canadian Press. An Air Canada passenger jet lands at Halifax Stanfield. Oh, that's the, I'm sorry, that's the credit for the photo used in this article. Okay. Air Canada is investigating how 5 suspicious people with fake tickets got on board a Toronto-bound flight on Friday. The airline confirmed that 4 Iranians and an Afghan, a person from Afghanistan, not the blanket, were thrown off the flight in Caracas, Venezuela, causing a 5-hour delay. Again, the airline confirmed, Air Canada, that 4 Iranians and a citizen of Afghanistan were thrown off of the flight in Caracas, Venezuela. The 5 reportedly had fake tickets and no visas to enter Canada. The captain made the discovery when there were 5 extra passengers aboard the flight. Early reports suggest that one of the workers facing charges is a local worker employed by a third party for Air Canada, although this person was wearing an Air Canada badge and uniform. The suspects will face charges linked to the illegal trafficking of 5 foreigners. There is no word whether the 5 people thrown off the flight are facing charges. So that's something to watch, obviously. What's going on there? All right. So I think it's time now for me to turn to the best part of the show, your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. Okay, let's start off with this. This was very interesting, I thought. Well, first of all, I did receive more feedback regarding N1s and EPR settings and EPR gauges and that kind of thing. And some audio feedback. Thank you, Ken, for sending that in. Don't know if I'm going to have time to read it in this. Well, I'll try. Well, you know what I'll do? I'll do that right now. Here, let's listen to Ken and some input about EPR and N1.
Hi, Captain Jeff. This is Ken, the First Officer at Express. Just wanted to send you feedback on your most recent show. Another good show. I just finished it the other day during one of my long walks. I'd like to thank you for that. During the show, you answered a listener feedback or question about engine settings, and you mentioned how we primarily use EPRs. And as far as you know, all aircraft, or jet aircraft that is, have EPRs. And I'd just like to add that not quite all of them do. I imagine most of them do, I suppose. But I know the aircraft that I fly does not have EPRs. We do not use EPRs. And that is in the Bombardier CRJ series aircraft. I fly the 200, and I know the 700 and 900 do not have them as well. We primarily set our power by the N1 settings. When we get our takeoff data, at the pushback, it gives us a target N1 value that we're going to set for the takeoff. Also, our FMS system will load that value into the system and display carats on our N1 gauges that we will reference or set our power to for the takeoff roll. Also, something they don't teach us, but I know a lot of guys I fly with, including myself, that we reference as far as takeoff power and engine settings is ITT, the inner turbine temperature. I'm pretty sure most all aircraft have that as well. At least I'm assuming they do. But I know for our particular aircraft, typical value, we know when we set the power N1 carats, another thing we're kind of looking for is our ITT settings. We know it takes approximately 800 ITT for our takeoff power to get the aircraft off the ground. Now, on a hot day when we're heavy, it might be upwards of 840 to 830 if we're not flexing. And then, of course, on a colder day and we're light and we're also flexing, it might be around 790 or something like that. But ballpark value between 800 and 810 is typically what we're looking for a normal takeoff power setting for our ITT. And that's good to know for a backup. I've seen on rare, not very often, but on rare occasion due to a computer glitch or something of that nature, the N1 carriage might fall off the display or disappear for whatever reason. If that's the case, if you know the target power setting that you're looking for in terms of ITT, you can continue to take off roll. As long as you know you got that around 800 to 810 set, you should be fine. Speaking and continuing on with engines and power settings, landing configurations. That's another time where we commonly look at our power settings. This is something they don't really teach us, but I know myself and a lot of other folks, it's just common knowledge. And perhaps it is too on the other aircraft. Maybe you can speak to that, Captain Jeff, on the Mad Dogs and other aircraft that you've flown, that when we're fully configured at ref, usually inside the marker, gear down at our final flap settings, one of the things we're looking at is the power setting. And I know for our aircraft, it takes approximately 65% N1 to hold that configuration. And give or take 2, maybe 3%, depending on the weight and the temperature. But that's one of the target values we look for. And one way to look at it, or someone's explained to me one time, is typically if you have to pull the power back, go below 60%, it's usually not something, you're not going to be able to hold it there and hold the speed. It's usually something not right if you're going below that. And also on the other end of the spectrum, our window is pretty much from 60 to 70%, I guess, total. If you have to push it at or above 70%, you should quickly start seeing an acceleration or trend vector in the airspeed. And if you're going up into the 70% margin or above just to hold the airspeed, then you're probably about to encounter a wind shear if you haven't got the indications already. That's typically, you shouldn't never need that much power to hold the configuration. Another way to look at it too is it's a power setting we need to maintain basically that energy state for the aircraft. And one of the lessons I learned shortly after coming on flying the line for the first time during my first few months is it's probably during the landings on those usually right after a cold front passes through, you get those clear days where it's really gusty out of the northwest. And I know coming into Atlanta, you're trying to land to the west, and you got that crosswind coming at you, 35, sometimes 40 knot peak gust coming from the right side. Personally, I think those are some of the most challenging landings that we do. That require a lot of attention, and they can be a handful sometimes. But I remember one of the first times I was shooting one of those landings. I was flying, and of course, I saw one of those peak gusts, airspeed. There was like a 15, 20 knot spike in the speed. And I had my hand on the throttle. I reached back, pulled the throttle back to compensate for the speed spike. And as soon as I did that, the captain I'm flying with reached over and pushed the throttle right back up. And he's like, "Don't ever do that." And he's like, because it's because basically the way he said it, and it made sense right away since he said it, because you need that power setting to hold that energy state. Because if you're going to go, out of that 65, if you're going to pull it into that 50 or 40% range, we're going to lose that energy state. And as soon as that spike and that speed falls back out, and we're below the energy state we need, things can get ugly real quick. So, just accept those deviations and those minor spikes is basically the lesson I learned from that. The speed will come back down into the range it needs, and you got to hold the energy state with the power setting that we need. We can still make minor adjustments because we don't have auto throttle, so we're doing this all by hand. So I occasionally might adjust it 2 or 3% for just some deviations of glide slope or winds, but overall, you can't ever make any major changes. Otherwise, there's something wrong if you're making major changes. You're either going to lose that energy state, or like I said, if you're going to the high end of that spectrum, you might be having to do that because of wind shear or something else. All right, Captain Jeff, I guess that's about all I got. Hope I didn't go too long, but anyway, just want to try to give you feedback, a more timely one this time instead of waiting too long to send you a bunch of feedbacks after a couple months. But we'll talk to you later, Captain Jeff. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks, Ken, and great feedback about EPRs and the use of N1 on the jet that you fly. And you don't have an EPR gauge. The ITT thing, I've never flown an airplane that has internal turbine temperature at all, but that was interesting. And of course, great advice as far as knowing pitch, pictures, power settings to maintain energy states, etc. Great stuff there, and that's why we're always, emphasizing control performance. Know what to set in your control instruments to get the performance that you desire. And that captain that you were flying with, great advice there. Don't pull that power back, because you have to have the power set to that setting to maintain our energy. So when you end up getting an increased performance, a wind gust or whatever, then just accept that unless it's excessive. And if it's excessive, then you're in an unstabilized approach area or parameter, and then it's time to go around and give it another try. But most of the time we allow the performance to increase, knowing that it's not going to last forever, and that gust of wind is going to die down, and you're going to wish that you had kept the power where it should be to maintain the energy state. So listening out there, watching out there, remember that whatever airplane you fly, make sure that you know what picture to look for in various phases of flight, and where that power should be to maintain safe airspeed. So good stuff. Thank you, Ken, for that. And also keeping in the same vein, we have this feedback from Chris. He said, "This is the first time I've written feedback in relation to topics you discuss in your show. During an episode recently, you were asked and discussed the purpose of EPIR to set power. On a following episode, you received feedback again about GE engines using primarily N1 for thrust settings. I work for a regional airline flying the CRJ-200, which has GE CF34-3B1 engines, and would like to provide some additional feedback about our GE engines. The only means of controlling thrust for the engines on the flight deck is through manipulation of the thrust levers by the pilots. They are mechanically connected to the fuel control unit, the FCU, which schedules fuel flow into the engine. Push up for more gas, pull back for less gas. Pretty basic. The FCU is a hydromechanical control unit that supplies fuel in response to mechanical commands from the thrust levers, or levers if you prefer. At low engine speeds, the fuel control unit mechanically controls N2 speeds in relation to the thrust lever position. At high engine speeds, those above 79% N1, there are transistors attached to the thrust levers which give an electronic signal to the N1 amplifier, a computer which moves the N1 metering valve. This valve acts like a mixture control on a piston engine and fine-tunes the fuel mixture to produce the greatest N1 speed for a given fuel flow. Let's see. If you or your listeners are interested, before I do that, he also he attached a diagram of the schematic for the fuel metering system for the engine in this RJ200, the GE CFM 34, excuse me, not CFM, CF34-3B1. So pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so I'll continue. If you or your listeners are interested, I also have a podcast inspired by you and the beginning of a blog where I discuss topics like these and much more. The blog post that I read, which was when I clicked on the blog website address, flapoperator.blogspot.com, pulled up an article called Automation in the RJ2, and it's definitely worth reading. Some good stuff in there. And he also talks about it in episode number 2 of his podcast entitled Flap Operator. Now, this gentleman's name is, I'm almost afraid to tell you about Chris's podcast, because let me just say it this way. It's really good, and you really need to listen to it, and you need to subscribe to it. And we need to encourage Chris to keep putting out this stuff. He's a young guy, I think 23 years old or something like that, flying as a first officer for a regional airline, just like Ken, our last bit of audio feedback there. And he is a natural at speaking, and great diction, and very understandable, has a great way or a knack of explaining things to a lay person and professional alike. So I think that you'll get a kick out of listening to Chris Turk's podcast entitled Flap Operator. I'll have a link to that. so you can subscribe to his podcast. Let's see what I was going to... Oh, his second episode talks about automation, talks about Children of the Magenta, talks about radar technology and onboard weather avoidance radar that we use on airliners, and some good tips on how to operate it correctly. And then at the very end of his second episode, he has some humor, and definitely worth listening to. So there, I did it. I told you about Christopher's podcast, his podcast, and it's excellent. You really need to listen to it. And if you end up just listening to his and you don't listen to mine anymore, that's okay, because this is a good guy. You're going to learn a lot. Or maybe listen to both of us. So here, I'm going to play a little excerpt from the very beginning of his second episode. Mind you, this is only his second episode. And when I was listening to it the other day on my walk, that was the latest episode. So he's just gotten started. And let's just listen to a little snippet here.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Flap Operator. I'm your host, First Officer Chris, and I think we have a really good show for you today. I'm going to talk about some topics that I ran into during my last couple of days at work while I was teaching a group of pilot trainees down in Charlotte, North Carolina at the training center. Also want to talk to you a little bit about some subjects I've been reading about lately that I ran into on the Airplane Geeks podcast, and also a couple of topics from Airline Pilot Guy and Captain Jeff, talking about automation management, automation complacency, and...
Okay, so there you go. There's just a little bit of an introduction to the Flap Operator podcast. And again, I'll have information on how you can find it on iTunes and find his blog, flapoperator.blogspot.com, on the show notes of the show. So great job, Chris. Keep up the good work. And thanks for mentioning this podcast in your second episode. Now, this one really kind of scared me a little bit and made me realize that what I say, I had to be careful about what I say, because people are listening to me and actually using my show for training purposes and advice and that kind of stuff. So this is from David Bick. My name is Dave. I'm a former line pilot from the corporate cargo world. Now I'm the director of training for a smallish U.S. government contract airline. I'm in charge of training for all company employees, such as pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, dispatchers, and line service personnel. Being an instructor at heart, I'm always searching for better and safer ways of doing things. I found your podcast very informative and helpful. Because of your podcast, I've been able to change policy, procedure, and training to increase safety and hopefully save lives. I just recently started listening, but when I'm all caught up, I may chime in with some voice feedback here and there, pending your approval, of course. I'm sure it'll be fine. David Bick, or Dave, Director of Training at Barry Aviation. So, wow. Well, thank you for sending me that feedback. I look forward to you getting all caught up and then sending in some voice and email feedback regarding safety issues and stuff like that. So that, as I said, got my attention, and honestly made me feel good, but that at the same time made me feel, whoa, I better be very careful about what I say and make sure that what I say is the right thing to say. So thanks, David, for that. Keith from Chattanooga writes, greetings again from Chattanooga, or maybe Charlotte, or D.C., depending on when you get the email. I'm not sure where you are, Keith. Let's see, he sent this to me back at the beginning of the month. It was quite interesting to hear your discussion about radiation exposure for pilots and flight crew and passengers. It's not often or ever that I find this discussed by the people who it affects, and it's definitely something that you and your colleges should know about, as well as the risks associated with radiation exposure. So, To start, I wanted to tell you a bit more about something that I think you might not be correctly informed about. Specifically, you mentioned wearing sunscreen while you're flying. That would be a good idea to protect your skin from sunburns, but radiation exposure is a much more complex issue. What sunscreen does do is absorb specific wavelengths of energy that you're exposed to. I have included a link to a great discussion about sunscreen on YouTube from one of my favorite science channels. The important thing to take away is that sunscreen is designed to block a relatively small segment of radiation that your body is exposed to. So would sunscreen limit your radiation exposure while flying? The answer is emphatically no. You are correct in reasoning why you do get more exposure. Having less atmosphere between you and the sun does cause your exposure to go up. What is causing the increase what is causing the increase in does I think I must be misreading the sentence. Anyway, the amount of energy your body is absorbing from radiation is the what is causing the increase in dose? Oh, I'm sorry. It was probably a spell check correction to whatever program you're using, and it turned your dose into does, so it completely threw me off. So let me try this one more time. What is causing the increase in dose, or the amount of energy your body is absorbing from radiation, is the lack of shielding from other types of radiation. The sun is spitting out many high-energy particles which collide with the stuff in our atmosphere. The energy is slowly drained from these particles as they collide. Normally, this occurs way up in the atmosphere, like at 30,000 feet, and so a lot of collisions occur before these particles get to the ground, and therefore they have lower energy and might just get absorbed by the dead layer of skin. Now, up in the air, the aircraft and its occupants are way more dense than the surrounding air. There is just a lot more stuff in the airplane than in the surrounding sky. Additionally, your body is made up of lots of water, which really likes to collide with these high-energy particles. That's why we use it in a nuclear reactor. And when they do give up almost all of their energy, and once they do, they give up almost all of their energy in one big shot. Your body is essentially like a giant target flying through the air. So you have a combination of being way more dense and the particles having way more energy. They haven't had a chance to slow down yet. These high-energy particles easily pass into your body and collide with the water in your organs and give you a radiation dose. That doesn't sound good. The other question that usually gets asked is, how much radiation am I experiencing? There's a rule for air travel. Again, this is really a rough estimate, as there are so many variables involved with this. For every hour of flight, you get 1 millirem of radiation dose. That's 1 MILI-REM of radiation dose. So you can ballpark your yearly dose. If you flew for 1,000 hours, you would have 1 rem of radiation doses each year. How do you compare to people who work actively in the nuclear power field? The latest statistic that I was quoted, the average nuclear power plant worker receives around 100 millirem a year. That statistic is a bit biased, as there are lots of people like myself who don't spend much time in the plant. Last year I received 3 millirem. And there are divers that work in the spent fuel pools that will receive 1 rem in less than a half an hour in the pool. In comparison, last year I was on 40 different flights, and each one averaged 2 hours. So I would have received 30 times more radiation from flying than I did for my job. That's scary. So what does this mean for you? Well, the amount of days you would live less due to being exposed to 5 rem of radiation every year from age 18 to 65 is 25 days, where living in the Southeast takes 350 days off your life. So there's my long-winded 2 cents about radiation exposure for pilots. If you ever have any more questions about this kind of thing, you know who you can ask. And then he has a question for me, but I'm going to pause momentarily before I answer Keith's question for me, because I'm noticing now that my iPhone is almost full, and I have to stop and offload to my laptop and then start again. So don't go anywhere. Airline Pilot Guy will return. We'll be right back. Okay, I am back, and we were reading the feedback from Keith regarding radiation exposure and dosage and such, and he had first of all, Keith, thanks for that information, I guess. I'm still not sure whether or not, well, I do know, and I think most pilots know, that we're exposed to a lot more radiation than a typical person is. Or if you're a frequent flyer, you're being exposed to more radiation than most. But as Keith mentioned, living in the southeastern United States takes 350 days off your life, I guess, because of the increased exposure to UV radiation from the sun. So thank you for that information, Keith. And if we do have any more questions regarding radiation, specifically how or as it affects folks like pilots and folks that fly a lot, we'll definitely know who to ask. Now, he says, how about a question for you? This one will be short, as this feedback has been long-winded and maybe soapboxy? No, I don't think so. How extensive is your knowledge about the planes that you fly? Not very. You have discussed lots of interesting technical aspects about the MD series of aircraft. What is the level of detail you're required to know? For myself, I have been through a reactor operator certification course, and as part of that training, I had to learn about everything. I was required to be able to discuss how each valve works and what things are interlocked with what valve, and or be able to discuss which power supplies provide electricity to what components, etc. I am assuming that you had to take some sort of test. How exhaustive was the test? I never got officially certified, as that was not the kind of class I was in, but to do so in the U.S. requires multiple day tests with oversight from the government at all times. Thanks for your time, Keith. Okay, and then he gave me some references from YouTube and another URL reference that I'll have in the show notes. If I remember, I'm sure I will, though. And if I don't, you'll remind me, right? Okay. Let's see. How extensive is our knowledge? Well, I can tell you things have changed over the years in the airline industry as far as my experience is concerned. Back almost 25 years ago, I was in my initial training class to learn how to be a 727 second officer or flight engineer. And basically back then, the philosophy was that you should be able to take the airplane apart and put it all back together with no nuts and bolts left over. I mean, not quite that literal, but you had to know really obscure things like what temperature in centigrade or Celsius does the pack overheat sensor shut down the pack and do this and do that. And you know what? This temperature wasn't even indicated anywhere in the cockpit that we could see. And so you're starting to wonder, well, why do I have to know that the number is 235 degrees C when I don't even have that gauge in there to, a detector to show me what the temperature is at that point in the air conditioning system? Well, over the years, things started to go in the other direction, where they decided that, we're just going to emphasize operational knowledge as opposed to systems knowledge. So they give us a basic overview of the systems of the airplane so that we have a general idea of how everything works, but they don't go into the itty-nitty detail, the gritty detail that we used to go into. And that has its advantages and disadvantages. I know that in a way that philosophy is good because we don't want people to know so much that they're up there doing troubleshooting that a mechanic should do, and you should be flying the airplane and getting passengers safely on terra firma and not trying to rebuild the airplane in flight. On the other hand, I think it's good to know a lot about the airplane you're flying so that if something happens that nobody ever thought of, that you can use your brain to kind of come up with a solution that may actually end up saving your life and the lives of your passengers. So I think the ideal thing is something in between knowing a heck of a lot or about everything you could possibly know about the airplane and its systems to the other end of the spectrum, which is don't worry about it, just turn the switch on and it works. Trust us. And then if something goes wrong, then you can get into your quick reference handbook, and then it'll take you step by step through what you need to do to get the problem solved and the airplane on the ground. That's kind of where we are now. And I think I see little hints that we're starting to go back in the other, you know how things go sometimes, the pendulum. The pendulum was at one end when I started with, knowing everything, and now it's like, know nothing. Just know the very basics, because we don't want to overwhelm you with stuff. But I think I see the pendulum swinging back maybe toward the center where things are going to be, you should know quite a bit about the airplane and its systems that you're flying. And you should also know very well about how to operate the airplane. So that's where I see the state of the knowledge of things. Now, I can tell you right now that the 727 was the first airplane that I was type rated on. When you get a type rating, you get an oral examination that is very, very thorough. And you spend sometimes an hour or 2 hours being grilled and asked questions by an examiner, sometimes even with the FAA examiner there to witness the company examiner giving you the oral examination. And at that point, you probably know more about that airplane than you're ever going to know. And then as time goes on, a lot of that stuff is lost. I mean, I can't tell you how many times where I look at something and I think, I used to know how that all worked and what this did, but now I'm kind of a little fuzzy on it because it's not something I use day to day. And when you don't, practice something or use it day in and day out, that knowledge kind of, gets replaced. The memory cells in your brain kind of get replaced by something else. Although they say, which I find very interesting, that everything that you learn and everything that you experience, all your memories are there in the folds of your mush inside your skull forever, and it's just accessing the data. That's the hard part, and that gets harder and harder the older we get. So, and I can tell you from experience, it's getting harder and harder to remember things that I used to know, and I know they're there. But for instance, when you smell something, sometimes that brings back a memory, or you hear some music and you go, yeah. And then all of a sudden that scene is vivid in your mind. Well, it's because it's all there still. It's just normally you can't access it, but something may trigger some kind of synapse. I know I'm not a brain surgeon I don't know all about this stuff, but I'm using general terms and probably improper terms for brain science. But anyway, I just find that fascinating. So getting back to training and knowing something about whatever you're doing. The 727, I knew a lot because that was the first airplane that I was type rated on. And then, of course, when I was bumped off that airplane to the MD 80 series, I knew a heck of a lot about the MD 80 series when I went through my type rating as a captain there. And again, same thing. I've been on this thing now for about 11 years or so, and as time goes on, I'm probably losing more and more of that information that I used to know. But that's why we go through recurrent training every year or every 6 months or every 9 months, whatever your company's recurrent training cycle is, so that it forces you to go back into the manuals and look at the information, look at the learning CDs, and look at the learning objectives and go, oh yeah, that's right, I remember that. And so that when you go in for training, hopefully you're adequately prepared, and you don't do what I do and wait to the last minute to try to cram for your training, and then you end up sometimes looking like a fool because you don't know everything you probably should have. But anyway, I digress. So I hope that answers your question about how much information you have to know about things. And yes, the same thing as in your industry, the nuclear power industry, that we do have tightly defined things that we have to know, and certain ways we have to perform, and it's a lot of strong oversight by the federal government via the Federal Aviation Administration. So, again, thanks for your feedback, Keith, and continue to listen and send in some more great feedback in the future. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop here just momentarily, not stop the show, but I'm going to pause momentarily and tell you about something. I received feedback, actually an email from the representative of a company that, and honestly, I almost threw this away because I just thought it was a generic ad and spam in my inbox, and then I something caused me to read something. Something must have caught my eye. And I thought, oh, they're actually talking to me directly about this technology, and they actually want to perhaps have a segment on my podcast and perhaps have an interview with the CEO of the company. So I read a little bit more and started reading about this company and its technology, and it's a Toronto-based tech startup company. The name of the company is KnowRoaming, KnowRoaming, KnowRoaming. And it is a company that is making and introducing this product that is a little sticker that goes on your SIM card on your smartphone or your whatever device has a SIM card in it. I guess it would work for tablets as well. I'm not sure, but we talked mostly about smartphones, such as iPhones and Android phones, and soon to come Windows phones and BlackBerry phones. And basically, this device goes on top of your SIM card, and you reinsert your SIM card. It has to be an unlocked phone, which you'll hear in our interview. We talked about that. And if you're a traveler that travels overseas a lot, so if you're listening to this show and you're in an international category and you like to have communication via your smartphone or tablet device, this may be something for you to work, at least to look into. I know that I flew a trip outside the country to Grand Cayman Island and turned on my phone, as I automatically do after I get to where I'm going, to check to see if I have any messages, to see what new mail I have and everything else. And then I immediately got some kind of a message that said, hey, you're not in your normal roaming or your normal network, and then all these rates are going to apply. And I went, and I turned it off. With this device, apparently, you don't have to run into that problem. You don't have to go to a country and buy a SIM card for Italy and a SIM card for Germany and a SIM card for France every time you go travel somewhere. If it's something you want to do, as far as have that the option of having your cell phone with you, and people can call your home phone, your cell phone, and get you wherever you are. Now, I know that many of you are travelers overseas that are not pilots, but spend a lot of time away from the United States, or you may be from a different country and you travel to the United States a lot. Well, you get the idea here. So this may be a product that may be of interest for you, my listeners. So I did the interview. It lasted a little bit longer than I expected it to, a little over 22 minutes. But take a listen, see if this is something that might interest you. And right now, as I mentioned, it's a startup, a kind of a self-funded thing. Let me go to their website, again, KnowRoaming.com. You have 7 days to pre-order, and it looks like these stickers will be shipped in February of next year. And the starter package, the single package, is $35, but they offered my listeners, you listening right now, a special deal. If you order or pre-order in the next 7 days or 6 days, however many days we have left here, basically the end of next week, if you order and use a discount code that provided for me the discount code is all capital letters, No Pilots, KNOWPILOTS. I'll have the discount code in the show notes. If you use that discount code, you get 50% off. So the single package price of $35 now becomes $17.50. And what that does is it gives you the sticker, the application device to put on your SIM card. And then, of course, you buy a certain amount of credit to be used when you're outside of your local roaming, your local carrier's area, and then you pay much reduced pricing. All the information is available on their website. Without further ado, let me play the interview, and then if you have any questions, head over to the KnowRoaming site, KnowRoaming.com, and see if that's something that you might be interested in. Again, don't forget to use the discount code KNOWPILOTS, and check it out. And let me know if you do, and if this works. So, without further ado, here is the interview. Well, hey, I have Greg Gundelfinger with me, the CEO of the company KnowRoaming, and that's KNOW roaming.com. And I was contacted by the company to possibly talk about this new technology that the startup company has introduced. And so without further ado, here's Greg Gundelfinger.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Jeff, we've been developing this technology for the last 2 years in stealth mode. And one of the biggest barriers in making this making a technology that would have a widespread adoption was to create a solution that was as convenient as roaming, and didn't ask the user to change any of their patterns. So we did this by creating a sticker that is attached to the traveler's SIM card, which most mobile phones will have inside them. And when the user or traveler leaves their home country, our smart sticker detects that they are outside of their home country and switches them over to our network, which gives them up to 85% discount on their roaming rates. So we've got coverage in over 200 countries, and our customers will get data, calls, and texts, all at these reduced prices. There's no contract that they need to enroll for or subscription service. The entire platform is prepaid, so the user's got complete control. The credit in your account never expires. So whatever you don't use on this trip, it will be ready to use on your next trip. Every country has a different rate, which can be found inside the app, which you can download from the respective app stores. And you can actually see and compare rates to your home carrier, so you can actually understand what kind of discount you will be getting. Another great thing that the app does is it gives you real-time billing. So inside the app, you have the ability to see what you've been charged for your last call or your last session of data. What we really wanted to do is bring transparency, billing transparency to users when they travel, so that we can overcome a huge industry problem, which is called bill shock, which is when you come back from a trip and you get slammed with a huge bill for using your cell phone, and not knowing how that actually happens. So, although our fees are significantly less than what you would normally be charged, we want our customers to always know what they are spending, and for them always to be in control.
Okay, so we're very attached to our smartphones and other internet-connected devices, and so one of the automatic things that most of us do, I know that I did, I was just telling Greg before we started the recording that just a couple months ago I flew to Grand Cayman Islands, and instinctively, once I pulled up to the gate and shut down the engines, and we were passengers were deplaning. I pulled my cell phone out and I turned it on, and then I realized almost immediately, I think there must have been some kind of a message or something kind of telling me that I was going to be using somebody else's network. And then I thought, I've heard these horror stories of people going on vacation or their trips if they're working crew members, and finding out, as you said, that bill shock where you don't realize that using your telephone in a foreign country is going to cost a lot of money. And this sounds like a great solution. So just to reiterate, you mentioned that it's not like, I know that there's a way that you can take the SIM card out for, as you mentioned, for phones that do have SIM cards, and then I guess we can get into what you do if you have a phone that doesn't have a SIM card. I guess you have to come up with some other solution, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, most of the new phones, or what the networks term as world phones, will have a SIM card.
Okay.
The iPhones that you receive from Verizon and Sprint, which are CDMA networks, will have a SIM card after the iPhone 4S.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much all phones that came out after the 4S will be able to take a SIM card.
Okay, so this sticker that you created or selling, you will actually apply yourself using an applicator that you send with the sticker, and it places it exactly in the proper position for the SIM card, and then you just put the SIM card back in, and then you're in business, right?
That's it.
Okay.
There's one other thing that the phone needs to be unlocked,
okay.
Which means that it has the ability to be able to log on to onto a network with another SIM card in it other than the one it was shipped with.
Okay.
And today, all Verizon world phones are shipped unlocked. So all the Verizon phones that have been bought probably in the last 6 to 12 months will be shipped unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
AT&T, you can approach them and they will charge you a nominal fee to have your phone unlocked. But I must draw your attention to the difference between jailbreaking and unlocking.
Mm-hmm.
Jailbreaking is something that could be dangerous in some circumstances to your phone, and it's essentially allowing people to run applications on their phone that the phone wasn't necessarily designed to do. Whereas unlocking your phone is just allowing your phone to accept SIM cards from other providers other than the ones that it was shipped for. There's nothing bad about having an unlocked phone. In fact, in most cases, it will increase the value of your device if you sell it one day.
Okay, so and I know that even if you have a phone that you're using on another network, such as AT&T, that's the network that I use, if you actually bought the phone outright, then you can get it unlocked, no question. But what if you, like most of us with AT&T, we have iPhones and other devices that are subsidized, and we're under a 2-year contract. Is it still possible to get the phone unlocked, or do you have to be finished with your contract?
AT&T have actually very good policies on unlocking your phones. They will charge you a nominal amount and unlock your phone.
Okay.
So you would just have to contact them, and their policy is available online.
Okay, very good. I know it's on your website, which is very informative, and it's a beautiful site, by the way. I love whoever did your programming did a fantastic job. Before I talk about the practicalities of how all this works, let me go back and say that this seems to me, this is something that is funded by just people kind of committing to purchasing this, kind of like a what are some of the places, Kickstarter and that kind of thing, but you're doing this on your own? Is that how this is working?
Yeah, so the idea behind the way in which we've launched into the market was that we adopted the crowdfunding approach, not because we required funding. It was more to fulfill a defined project. And we've been developing this technology, as I said, for the last 2 years. There are 15 of us that work on the project on a full-time basis. And essentially, we decided that it was time for us to offer this technology to early adopters and the public, so that we can broaden our beta essentially. And the number we decided on was 1,000 users, and so we decided that we would launch our own crowdfunding a project on our website, which equated to $35,000, and we were able to achieve that number in under 72 hours.
Wow!
So that really demonstrated the demand for the product, and showed that this is something that people really want. So we're scaling up our business accordingly now.
Okay.
So this is kind of non-traditional, because we're doing everything pretty much in reverse. We're almost pre-selling the device and then scaling up our business back to front.
That must have been pleasing to you when you saw that within 72 hours you reached your $35,000 goal. I see right now on the site that you're over 90,000 and have 1,417 backers so far. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I buy one of your SIM chips, which are very competitively priced, I'd say, not expensive at all, starting at the single package of $35. But I know you're going to go into a little bit more detail about that a little bit later in the interview here. But so I get the sticker and I apply it and I put it on my SIM and I make sure that my phone is unlocked. And so I guess I'm going to have to sign up for a certain amount of credit. Is that the way this works?
Yeah. So we sell credit in 25, 50, 75, and $100.
Okay.
And that credit is prepaid credit, and is credit that does not expire.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, when you start to travel, depending on the country that you're in, we'll just draw down on that balance for your data and for your calls and for your text messages. And if you have any credit left over after the trip, it will be there for your next trip.
Okay.
So there's no contracts or subscription. It's really a true pay-as-you-go model.
Okay. So now this flexibility gives me what? It allows people, let's say, in the United States, to call my cell phone number and it'll ring no matter where I am, as long as I've allowed the system to work, the KnowRoaming to work.
Absolutely. So the idea is that you are absolutely reachable, even though for all intents and purposes you have taken out your SIM card or disconnected your home SIM card, your AT&T SIM card. So the workflow is that before we switch you over to our smart sticker, we set up a call forward on your home AT&T SIM. And we say to that AT&T SIM, please send Jeff's calls to this local number in the US, which is a number that is tied to our service.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody trying to reach you, that call will reach our servers, and we will then connect that call to you wherever you are in the world. So you are completely reachable.
Okay. So let's say when I decide to take a family vacation and I can't afford to do this right now, but let's say I want to spend a month in Tuscany, and I meet some people in Tuscany, and I've set it up to use KnowRoaming while I'm in Tuscany, and I meet some local people, and I want to give them a number to call me in Tuscany. Will that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got two options. They can either call you on your home AT&T number, which would mean that they would have to make an international call, or alternatively, we give our customers the option to buy numbers in the country that they are traveling in. So you can purchase a number in Italy. And that would be there would be a monthly charge attached to that, and that ranges from about $3 to about $8, depending on the country that you are buying a number for. And then you could issue friends and family and business associates a local number without them having to phone your US number.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So that's just an option. You don't have to do that.
That's just an option. You certainly do not have to do that, but it's something that people do appreciate.
Okay. So let's say now that I'm on a trip and I'm on a layover in Paris, and I'm using KnowRoaming, and I want to call home to see how my family's doing, to talk to my wife and my children. So this works in this direction as well, right? Not only people can call me on my local number, but I can also use my phone to call my home phone or whatever in the United States.
Absolutely, and not only will you be charged really a nominal fee for that call to call back to your family back in America, but the number that will be displayed when you make that call will be your US AT&T number. So for all intents and purposes into the outside world, you're on your AT&T SIM, but in actual fact, you're on our smart sticker.
Excellent. So a lot of transparency here, because as you said, in the included app for iPhone and Android, and I guess some other platforms to come, the ability to see what the rates are going to be before you use the system are there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can look and see what the rates are before you go on a trip, as well as inside the app we give you the ability to compare rates, so you can actually compare what we would be charging you and what you would be charged if you were to stay on your home SIM card.
Okay.
So we really do give as much information over to our customers as possible, so they can make informed decisions when using our product.
Okay. So right now I see that the app is available for the iOS and the Android via Google Play, and it looks like BlackBerry and Windows 8 or Windows Phone apps are going to be coming soon.
That's right. We are working towards that, and our initial target platforms have been Android and iPhone.
Okay. Well, great. So what else would you like us to know, especially, as I mentioned before, the folks that listen to this show, many people travel quite a bit, and a lot of that international travel. And, of course, I also have listeners and viewers who are active aircrew members, and they may want to know, or is there anything else that you can tell these people specifically about why they really need to get one of these, and why it would be worth their while to look into KnowRoaming?
I mean, roaming charges are prohibitively expensive, and that's the reason that a company like mine, has gained so much interest, throughout the world. And today it's almost unacceptable not to be able to use your mobile phone while you're traveling. we live in what I term a hyper-connected world, and there's just so much information about cities and places that we go today that can enrich that experience. And if you're able to use your phone as you do at home, the experience is just so much better. So it's really something that if you haven't done before, and this product now unlocks, I'd really encourage people to use it and to jump onto the platform.
Okay. Well, I noticed that there is a special offer, a 50% pre-order discount to pilots and cabin staff if they use a discount code. Is that still available?
Absolutely, that's still available, and we believe that air staff, pilots, and air crew, could really benefit from this technology, and that's why we've made this reference code, which I'm sure will be you will distribute for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we would welcome their feedback and for them to use the technology.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, I look forward to checking it out myself, and if my listeners and viewers have any more questions, I think that as I mentioned before, your website is very informative. Most of, or if not all and more of the questions that I asked today are there on your website, answered in a great fashion. So check out www.knowroaming, KNOW roaming.com, and I guess that's a play on words, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, it's we were besides the fact that we like puns here. We believe that we really are educating people on how to use their phone in the best possible way when they travel.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
As well as we telling them not to roam.
Exactly. So no roaming, and hey, no roaming. You don't want to pay those roaming fees, right? If you don't have to. Of course, I know that you are actually paying roaming fees, but they're so much less than what you'd be paying with your normal carrier. Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, Greg,
thank you very much, and if I look forward to your feedback. I'll be sending you a unit, and I hope that your listeners will appreciate learning more about our company.
Well, I can't wait to try out the technology, and I wish every success for this product and your company, and I'm sure it's going to be a hit. Okay, there you have it. There was the interview, and it was funny. I was kind of hoping to talk a little bit more with Greg after our recorded interview portion, and then he was gone. And so it was great. Greg, if you're listening to the podcast and our interview, thank you for taking the time out to explain your product, and I hope that some of my listeners end up buying the product, and hopefully it works for them. And again, thank you for offering the 50% off discount code. I hope that people will not forget to use that. And for those of you who are concerned that my show is going to turn into a product placement kind of podcast, no, it's not. This is just one of those things that I thought that would really be of interest to a certain segment or a certain portion of the people that listen to this podcast. And the only thing, I didn't get paid to do this. I was asked if I might, be interested in telling my listeners about this product. And the only thing I guess I could say as far as compensation is I think he said something about sending one to me. So I guess I was compensated $17.50. But I don't, that I hardly ever fly internationally as well. So, or as it is. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to use this product, but it's going to be kind of nice to have in case I end up flying a trip that takes me to Canada or the Caribbean or Mexico, or maybe in the future I'll be flying a bigger jet that goes over to Europe and South America and Africa, Asia, etc. And I'll be able to turn on my KnowRoaming SIM card and use the nice lower roaming data and voice rates. So again, check it out, and thanks for listening. And now let's get on with the Airline Pilot Guy Show. More of your feedback.
Hey Captain Jeff, this is Nick from Orange County, California. Just wanted to leave you some voice feedback that contains a couple questions for you. First off, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the podcast. It helps with my commute to work, and I really enjoy it because it's very informative, yet you got a little bit of humor, a little bit of seriousness, and you tie in your own personal experiences, and that's really what draws the most people to this podcast, I think, is just your level of personality that you're able to mix in with it. Now, on to my questions. The first question for you is basically kind of a true or false. I saw some pictures of this in a video, but is it true that on the MD-80, MD-90 series aircraft, on the glare shield, there is a series of mirrors that points to a compass that is mounted behind the first officer seat? If that is true, why on earth is the compass back there? It kind of looks like, they built the airplane and went, shoot, we forgot the compass. So I was wondering if you could leave me a reply to that, and so I'm sure everyone else will want to know because it's quite interesting if that is true. My second question for you, I noticed this on the autopilot panel there, and again, I don't know which exact aircraft, just the Mad Dog series in general, but there is a button, I believe, that says PERF, P-E-R-F, and I was wondering what on earth PERF means. I doubt it means perfect landing, because I've been on some of those aircraft where they definitely were not a perfect landing. But I'm sure you weren't flying it, though. I'm sure you weren't. Just kidding. But anyway, if you could let me know what that means, and everyone else, that would be amazing. Keep up the great work. Again, love the podcast. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Thanks.
Nick knows it better than I do. My ending of my show. Thanks, Nick, and I thank you for your nice compliments with the podcast, and I like your sense of humor as well. I think we probably share the same kind of sense of humor, and thanks for your great audio feedback. That was fantastic. Now, you were referring to I think you were referring to Kent Wien's, I think that's the way he pronounces his name, W-I-E-N, Cockpit Chronicles videos, which are fantastic, and one which is often mentioned in feedback to me. Newer listeners to the show don't know that in previous episodes I've already talked about the Cockpit Chronicles video, specifically the one about, I can't remember exactly what the name of it was, like why I love or fell in love with the MD-80 or something like that. So he has a video that talks about some of the idiosyncrasies and quirks of the Mad Dog, let's just say. And it's very well done, and it's interesting. But he's an American Airlines pilot, and they fly I think it's the MD-82 or 83 series, and it's the older version of the MD-80 aircraft. And well, let me first address the first part of your question regarding the standby compass and the location of the compass. And yeah, we all go when we first upgrade or train on this airplane, never having flown a DC-9 aircraft or a Mad Dog, and then they tell you that the standby compass is located somewhere above the first officer's head, and then through a series of mirrors and smoke, you can actually see what the reading is on that standby compass. And there on the glare shield, you're right, there's a little tiny mirror for both the captain and the first officer, and you can flip it up and adjust it so that it's pointed to an area behind the first officer's head, way back up there. You have a light that you can turn on to illuminate, because if you don't turn the light on, then it's just a big black hole that you're looking into. So you got to turn the little standby compass light on, and that is actually reflected off another mirror. So the actual standby compass is mounted up there, and it's facing toward the back of the airplane, and then there's a mirror that's kind of reflecting that down to the glare shield area, and then you use your little individual mirrors. I'm talking about maybe 3 inches wide by 1 inch tall. That's about the size of the like half of a business card size mirror that you can pop up and look at the standby compass. And that's something we're supposed to check every single flight, because that's one of the critical instruments if we lose all of our other instruments. And I thought that was funny how you said, like, oh darn, we forgot the standby compass. Where are we gonna put it? Well, there's no more room up here, so we'll have to put it back here behind the first officer's head. The reason it's there, and a lot of airplanes have it up on like one of the pillars, front pillars of the airplane, and one of the reasons that you have to be careful with these standby compasses, or sometimes they're called whiskey compasses or wet compasses, because they are affected by electromagnetic fields and radiation. And so you want to find a place that this standby or wet compass or whiskey compass is somewhat isolated from electromagnetic effects. So apparently the McDonnell Douglas folks decided that putting it up there, or maybe they did some tests and they found that they put it in the normal position that you see it in a lot of, like in the Boeings and perhaps the Airbus products. Maybe there was just too much radiation up there for whatever reason, or the mass of metal was just too much in that area, and it was affecting the accuracy of the standby compass. And they said, well, let's stick it back here because it's further away from all the stuff up here, all the electromagnetic radiation. And so that's how they came up with that location, which is, I agree, really, really strange, really odd. Now, regarding the perf button, I wish it were a button that I could push and would make a perfect landing, but alas, no. And in fact, the airplane that I fly does not have a perf button on it. I believe those are for the earlier models of the MD-80, the Mad Dogs that didn't have vertical navigation systems on them. And well, here, and I didn't ask Kent his permission to play this little snippet of his podcast, his video on YouTube, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind. So here, let me hear what he has to say about the perf button.
There's a function on the airplane called perf. When we're flying along level, if we push this button right here called perf, what that does is it maintains the altitude as best it can within plus or minus 100 feet at cruise with the autopilot. Instead of adding power and taking power off and adding power and taking power off, it uses just its natural ability to find the altitude to control the airspeed. Well, the problem with that is you could be 100 feet low or 100 feet high, and it's a goofy system and nobody ever uses it.
We have a button on the newer Mad Dogs called what is it called now? Turb, T-U-R-B. And basically what that does, if you're in some pretty bad, I mean, I've never used it before, I've never seen anybody use it, but if you're in like severe turbulence and you have the autopilot on, and now my reaction would be to turn everything off and just, hold on to the yoke and try to fly the airplane through that severe turbulence. But I guess if you're the kind of person that wants to try to leave the autopilot on when you're going through really, really bad turbulence, you can hit the turb button, and what it does is it just kind of freezes the attitude of the airplane. If it's in a bank, it rolls wings level, so it gives you wings level, and then whatever your pitch attitude is. It doesn't try to maintain an altitude as the autopilot normally would when you're in altitude hold, because if you're going through some really, really bad turbulence, the autopilot's going to be doing all kinds of crazy things to try to get you to the altitude that you were assigned. So that's one of those buttons that if it's just, your fillings are coming out of your teeth and you can't even see straight, maybe hitting the turb button will help you get through that turbulence. I don't know. I've never seen anybody use it. Now, going back to the perf button on the earlier Mad Dogs, And maybe the DC-9s had it too. I don't know. But as I mentioned, I never flew the DC-9, the classic DC-9. But he described it as a system that kind of basically gives up altitude to kind of smooth out fluctuations in airspeed. The L-1011, an airplane that I flew and love, had a system like that on it. And maybe it was just the Dash 500s that had this system. But it would basically do the same thing when you were in altitude hold and your airspeed started increasing, then the autopilot would actually start a little bit of a climb, and it would go up 100 feet, maybe sometimes almost 200 feet, and then it would kind of go back down and back down and back to your assigned altitude. And then if it got a little bit too slow, then it would start descending. It would trade a little bit of that altitude to maintain the airspeed. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast that, you know, we'd be flying across the country in that airplane, and people would be complaining about mountain wave and other turbulence, and we'd say, or we'd look at each other and go, you know, it's a nice smooth ride where we are in our airplane, because the system would kind of even everything out by just trading a little bit of altitude for airspeed to keep everything nice and smooth. Now, I'm not so sure if that system would still be allowed to be used in today's world of reduced separation, reduced vertical separation airspace, RVSM, where, you know, we're all now at 1,000 feet, even above 20. It used to be up to 29,000 feet, you could have 1,000 foot spacing. And then above 29,000 feet, it was 2,000 feet between altitudes, whether you're going in the same direction or opposite direction. Then they came out with this new system, or this new operating procedure called RVSM, and everything had to be certified to be able to, you know, the tolerance had to be very tight to fly an airplane right at a specific altitude. And if your airplane met that standard, you could fly in the RVSM airspace, which is above 29,000 feet, and the spacing is still 1,000 feet. So at first it was kind of odd for those of us who were used to flying up in the 30,000s, let's say 35,000, 33, 37, whatever, and having 2,000 feet separation, 2,000 foot separation between altitudes, and then all of a sudden now we're at 1,000 feet, and you're looking at other airplanes 1,000 feet apart and go, wow, that's close. Anyway, I got off track with the altitude, but that's the perf button. Kent does a great job of describing it and other very interesting things in his Cockpit Chronicles video on how I fell in love with the MD-80, or whatever the title is. Thanks, Kent, for allowing me to play that on my podcast. And I'll have a link to his YouTube video, and you can check out all the other great videos he has there. He also does one on the iPad, used as a flight kit, or electronic flight bag, or whatever they want to call it. So that may be of interest to you as well. So thank you, Nick, for your great feedback, and don't hesitate to send some more in the future. Rodney sent this to me. He said, again, catching up on podcasts, and certainly a question about the hot mic situation that I didn't understand. Okay, so on an earlier podcast, I played that little excerpt of a flight going into Dulles International, IAD, Washington Dulles International Airport, Washington, D.C. Actually, I think it's in Virginia, where the flight was getting vectored for an approach, and apparently one of the pilots, I'm assuming it was the captain, didn't really particularly like the way the controllers were handling them, and he was transmitting over the frequency. His microphone button had stuck, or maybe he was still pressing it. Whatever happened there, he had a hot mic, and he kind of was expressing his dissatisfaction with the controller's skill while the mic was open, and the controller kind of took umbrage to the statements. And so getting back to Rodney's question, though I understand that it was during a critical phase of flight that they were talking about all of this, do you believe that it was cause for a phone call to discuss it with approach? Yes, someone's feelings got hurt being criticized that their department is not doing a good job, and I understand that it may not be this particular controller that was being talked about, but I don't think it warranted a phone call. Just wondering your thoughts. Thanks. Well, Rodney, thanks for your feedback, your question, and as far as whether I feel it was warranted for the controller to give the phone number and have a discussion with his pilot after the fact, I think you're right. I think that there were some hurt feelings. I don't know if they have some technical reason when they have to have a conversation with a pilot after the fact on the ground over the phone. I'm not sure what their regulations are. Perhaps Kevin Cox, my California Catholic controller, or Sean McCarney, my UK Catholic controller, if they're listening to this show, they can send me feedback about that as far as when it's appropriate to give the telephone number to talk about this. Now, I know that when you have like an altitude deviation or you enter some prohibited airspace or something like that, that seems pretty cut and dried as far as this is a time to give the crew, the air crew, the telephone number so that they can call and talk about this when everybody's on the ground. As far as this case, I don't think there was any safety of flight issue. I think, again, you sensed it as well, Rodney, that it was probably unnecessary. It was just a controller who took offense to what that pilot was saying. So, and I kind of understand his anger and frustration with the pilot, but that's all I can say about that. Probably not necessary, but at the time, in the heat of the battle, he thought, I really want to give this guy a piece of my mind when he gets on the ground. So, okay, now let me adjust this to display stuff that on the date it was created, so that I can try to play some of the stuff that was sent to me almost a month ago. And let's start with Brian. Brian sends in this feedback about fractional ownerships.
Hello, Captain Jeff. I've been a fan since your appearance on the Airplane Geeks. I want to send some feedback in response to Area 51's questions about fractional ownership. I'm a single-engine land private pilot with an instrument rating, and I just got my license a little over 5 years ago. And I've been a part of 2 fractional ownerships, one on the East Coast, and now one at my current airport, Papa Whiskey Tango, just west of the Class Bravo from SeaTac. They both run a little different, but each has its pros and cons, and the reason I had to leave the first one was just I got a new job and had to move out to the West Coast. Both were set up as a nonprofit club and had a charter, and the members in good standing were pretty much allowed to vote new members in. The first club I was involved with had 2 Cessna 172s and a 182. It had space for up to 30 members, but not all were flying, some were inactive. And so that sounds like a lot, but there really was a lot of space on the schedule for people to come in and fly. The club I'm currently involved in has a single Cessna 182, 7 members, though there is one share for sale. And again, not all those members are currently active. Some don't fly as often as some of the others do. One of the main differences between the first and the second would be the first would assess the airplane value based on current market price. And then if you wanted to leave the club, they would absorb your share and then sell it to somebody else. The part of the club I'm currently in, if a member wants to leave, it's on them to sell their share to whoever they can. And again, the members have to vote that in. Just some words of advice. I would say check the schedule for the last year and the current one and see the availability of the things or the times you like to fly. Just make sure it's open. See how much they're budgeting for their engine reserve. Are they paying for it at realistic prices? Does the treasurer have funds in CDs or risky investments? Some treasurers have money in money market funds, which can be good or bad. Besides, there's a TBO, time before overhaul, and that can be a big part. So, like you said, check the time on the airframe, the time on the engine, and then see if they're actually budgeting for that. If someone plans to fly IFR, make sure, an IFR GPS will add a lot more options. Also, would you be required to say carry more insurance than the club currently has? Hope this helps a bit. I enjoy your podcast and blue skies and tailwinds. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, Brian, for that experience and advice about fractional ownerships. I hope that I forget who it was that was asking about fractional ownerships in previous episodes, but I've gotten a lot of good feedback about that, and apparently that's a great way to get into private general aviation by sharing the ownership of the airplane. But a lot of good things that you mentioned here, Brian, things to look out for when you go into these relationships. And so, again, thanks for that feedback. And let's move on with Chris. He says, love the show. Keep up the good work. I'll try. Thank you, Chris. My questions this time around deal with different aircraft you've flown. How many MD-80s does Acme have? Over 100. I don't know the exact number, like 129 or something like that. How have you flown all of the MD-80s in the Acme fleet? Probably, but I haven't kept track of all the different tail numbers and if I've flown each one. So I don't know. Maybe. Probably. And do you have a favorite tail number you have flown multiple times? Like one that handles really well or doesn't come up with many maintenance problems, etc.? No. Sometimes you fly an airplane that flies particularly well or taxis very smoothly or whatever, but I never. Now maybe guys that fly this airplane or fly airplanes for airlines do this, but I never make a special note of it. No, not even a mental note. So I just fly the airplane they assign me, and then maybe when I'm flying it, I'll go, oh yeah, I think I've flown this one before. It's nice. I like the way the responsiveness of the controls and the way the ailerons move and the roll rate and all that kind of stuff. I really like the way this flies. It's interesting how airplanes that are supposedly the same airplane fly a little bit different. I mean, they all fly pretty much the same, but there are little differences here and there, and some are really nice, and others are like, ugh, this is a piece of junk. How did this one get off the assembly line? Now that a lot of it may have to do with the fact that these airplanes have been flying for 15, 20 years and have been through a lot and have been through a lot of landings, good and bad, and exposed to all kinds of things. So that may be, and actually some of these airplanes have actually been involved in accidents, gear up landings, sheared off main gear landings at LaGuardia. Various things that the manufacturer and the company was able to repair and get the airplane airworthy again. So these airplanes have been through a lot, and some of them have weathered it better than others. And but no, I don't keep a personal log of which ones are better, which ones are worse, and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of wish I'd had taken the time to do that, and made notes in my log book about this particular airplane. I liked this about it, or I didn't like this about it. But like so many things in life, sometimes you don't really think about it until it's too late. And I can't remember any of this stuff. More than a week or two ago, I don't remember. So, good questions though, Chris. But maybe you listening, if you're a commercial airline pilot, and maybe you do keep track of the particular tail numbers and which ones had certain characteristics, or what certain ones are your favorite and certain ones you can't stand flying. If so, send me some feedback. Let me know. Hear a different perspective on this. As I mentioned a lot, I call the show Airline Pilot Guy, and I am one of many, many, many professional airline pilots around the world. And this podcast is really a reflection of my opinions about my job and my tiny little slice of aviation. And some of my views and opinions are not held even by the majority of pilots out there in the airline world. So don't use me as a benchmark, please. But I do think that there are several that do feel the same way. I have the same philosophy about many things. But again, I am not pretending to represent everyone out there. So just thought I'd throw that in there as a reminder. And again, the reason why I use Acme Airlines is because I don't want my real airline to. I don't want anybody to think that that I represent the real world airline that I fly for. I don't. I only represent my own views, my own opinions about this wonderful career as an airline pilot. So there you go. Well, looks like it's time for me to stop again because my phone is telling me that the battery is low, and my stomach is telling me that
These pretzels are making me thirsty.
These pretzels are making me thirsty.
Oh, these pretzels are making me thirsty.
Now, I have not been eating pretzels, but I am thirsty. So that means it's time for me to have a nice IPA at the sports bar downstairs and get something in my stomach because it's starting to growl. And I'll be back after dinner, and we'll finish this thing up. So hang in there. Okay, I'm back from dinner. It was great. I went downstairs to the Players Sports Bar here in the hotel, the West Shore area of Tampa. Had a couple of, I think it was Goose Island. I think it's somewhere up in Illinois or Michigan or somewhere up there. Good brewery and decent IPA. And one of the things I like to order from the menu at the Players Sports Bar is the, what do they call that? French dip sliders. There we go. So anyway, now I am all taken care of as far as food is concerned, and we need to press on because I think that we have, including the interview and all the other stuff, we're probably around the 2-hour point right now, maybe over a little bit. And so let me try to get a little bit more in, and then we'll quit. And as usual, so much more that I wanted to play and read and answer, but I just can't get to it all. So I try. I really do. So this is from Mark Van Ram. I'm listening to APG 087 about the firing of the Southwest pilot for the hard landing at LaGuardia. That brought to mind a question about license insurance for professional mariners, master, chief mate, chief engineer, first assistant engineer, etc. There has always been an option to purchase license insurance individually. If your license is in jeopardy with a Coast Guard hearing, the insurance will defend you and provide other benefits. Is something similar for airline pilots to defend their license. As for the company firing, I would expect that the union would go to bat for the pilot. You are correct, sir. The union is one of those benefits. You know, we pay a certain percentage of our pay goes toward supporting the union. They bargain for us and take care of our contract negotiations. And maybe more importantly, they actually have our interests at heart, and they defend us if we get into trouble. So they do provide counsel and support at hearings and that kind of thing. As far as license is concerned, we do have loss of license insurance. I don't have it for myself. It's probably too late now for me to get it because I have just a little over 10 years remaining in my useful career. And I would imagine that loss of license insurance would be very expensive for me right now. Now, if I were to do it all again and look back to when I started, when I was 30 years old, I would probably sign up for it and be paying for it, and it would probably be a lot less expensive and more useful for me. But now that I'm getting so close to retirement, not that close, 10 years, I would imagine that the cost would be prohibitive and, not give me that much benefit if I did do something to lose my license. So, but insurance is just that. It's one of those things where you decide, okay, I'm going to get this. I know I'm paying a lot of money for it. Chances are, hopefully, I won't have to use it. and it'll just be money that I've thrown away. But hey, if something does happen, then it's probably money very well spent. So yes, there is loss of license insurance, disability insurance, and all that kind of stuff. Brad writes, just wanted to thank you again for the wonderful show. Thanks. Just listened to your appearance on the Aviation Career Podcast. That was great and very informative. I think I will start listening to that one regularly as well. Carl Valeri does that one. He also co-hosts with some other panelists on the Stuck Mic podcast. And I very much enjoyed my time with Carl talking about airline flying. And his show is about various careers that you can pursue in the aviation world. Here's an unusual aviation career twist for you. One of the guys I work with was a fairly new hire at United before 9/11, and needless to say, was furloughed. So he kept his number at United, went to medical school, became an anesthesiologist, started that career, and now is going back to fly at United, where he will now have enough seniority to hold a line. He will still work 1/4 time here as an anesthesiologist. Talk about having your cake and eating it too, flying jets and working in a busy OR, not to mention some good career insurance too. Plus, if there is ever an in-flight emergency, ... My 8-year-old son and I listen to your show together, and I learn a lot. Hello, Brad. Yeah, Brad's son. Do you mention his name in here? No, Brad. Come on. Anyway, hello, Brad and Brad's son. We fly Acme a lot, mainly through Minneapolis, St. Paul. He visits the flight deck every chance he gets, and it can be hard for him to get him out of there sometimes. I must say, every single Acme pilot has been more than willing to take time from their busy days to spend some time with him in there. Once recently, I caught up with him in the flight deck in a very interesting conversation between him and a young female A320 first officer on why he thinks the 757 is the best thing in the sky, and how he thinks Airbus pilots may be too reliant on automation. One guess which podcast he heard that last part on. However, they did agree that there is a lot more room in the Airbus cockpit than the 757, so that was good. I thought she was going to die laughing. Maybe we will run into you someday. If so, prepare to spend a little extra time up front after the flight. And it would be my pleasure, Brad. And that's interesting. I do have to be careful about what I say, don't I? I was wondering if you had any desire to fly another type of domestic narrowbody at Acme, such as the 737, 757, or 320, just for a change. If you wanted to, how much effect would this have on your job? You're a senior captain. If you went to either of these types, would it affect you a lot in terms of basing or scheduling? Would this be a factor in making the decision? Or do you just plain like the MD-80 enough to stay put? Okay, I'll answer that part and then I'll answer the last part of your feedback or questioning. Seniority has a lot to do with it. I am not particularly tied to the Mad Dog because I love the Mad Dog and the way it flies. I am staying here because I have really good seniority on it, top 5% of the captains on that airplane in Atlanta. So that gives me the flexibility to fly the trips that I want to fly and, fly the days that I want to fly, be home when I want to be home in the holidays. In fact, basically the last week of this month through the entire month of December, I'm going to be off because I put all my vacation together. And so I'll be off for Thanksgiving. I'll be off for Christmas. And if I were on a different airplane, I would not have that seniority. I probably couldn't get that vacation. I would probably have to fly weekends. I'd probably have to fly to places I don't want to go because I don't have any choice or control over the trips that I fly. So, for instance, as I mentioned, on the Mad Dog in Atlanta, I'm about 5% from the top. I'm not going to get into numbers, but I'm pretty high up. On the next airplane that I could fly would be the 737, and I'm in the bottom half, the top part of the bottom half of the seniority list, about 62%. So I go from 5% to 62%, which means I go from all weekends off, holidays off, to maybe a couple weekends off, maybe not, and flying some crappy trips. Then it gets worse from there. I go to the 757, 767, which now is becoming a combined category. Well, the 757, 767 has always been a combined category at Acme, but then they had an international section of that called the ER, and now the 767 ER, 767 domestic, 757, they're all the same category. And I'd be about the 75th percentile, maybe even worse than that, maybe between 75 and 85% from the top. So I'd be darn close to the bottom, which means I would be probably squarely in the reserve flying, reserve ranks, which means that you can't even get a regular schedule. You're just going to be on call for a certain number of days per month and off on certain days. And chances are those off days are not going to be during the weekend. So you see the problem here. And prior to bankruptcy, the pay rates on these various airplanes that I've just been talking about, there was quite a bit of disparity as far as, jumping up from the airplane I'm on now to a bigger airplane. The pay raise, the hourly pay rate differential was pretty high. So sometimes it was worth, or back then it was worth, possibly putting up with some lack of seniority for the extra pay that you would get compensated with. Now it's not so much that way. After bankruptcy, the pay rates, the hourly pay rates for the various airplanes are much closer together. There's not a huge difference anymore as there used to be. And so instead of going to the 75, 76, 76ER category, if I fly 1 or 2 extra trips per month on the Mad Dog, I've basically made the same amount of money. So I choose to stay on this airplane mainly for the seniority and being able to make up for that difference in pay by picking up extra overtime flying. So as far as a desire to fly another airplane, no, right now I'm in this point in my life, I don't really care that much. My dream job would be to fly the 75, 76 category, fly mostly really nice, easy domestic trips, and then maybe every once in a while, like every month or two, get a trip over to Europe. I'm not going to do that until I have the seniority that allows me to pick my trips and that allows me to have the time off that I need to
Good day.
Off. So that's a little spiel about why I'm staying on the Mad Dog for now. And but that's going to change probably here in the next 3 to 5 years. Things are going to really start rapidly accelerating with all the retirements we're having and everything else. So who knows? In a few years, I may be on a different airplane, a bigger airplane, more pay, and still have decent seniority. Okay, he goes on. I heard you talk about the legalities of podcasting. How big of a deal is it at Acme that you do this? Would they really care if they found out? There was a great airline pilot blog going for a few years called Flight Level 390, which was extremely well done, but abruptly stopped. That author also went to lengths to hide his employer. Personally, I think podcasts like yours and a blog like his are one of the best sources of free positive PR Acme or his airline can get. Instead of potentially worrying about guys like you doing it, they should actually be paying you to do so. Just my 2 cents worth. Thanks again, Brad. Well, I do appreciate that sentiment, but I don't think it's because the airlines don't want us to do this. I think it's because that guy that did the Flight Level 390 and me, we don't want to be a PR branch of the airline we fly for, because they may ask us to say or whatever, do things or represent the company in a certain way, which we don't want to do. Exposes us to a lot more liability, I think. I just like it better this way. I'm not getting any compensation for this. I'm doing it out of a labor of love. I can say what I want to say about things and, state my honest opinion about things and not feel like I have to worry about a supervisor saying, Jeff, don't say that, or you can't say this. I don't want to have that kind of a restriction placed upon me for doing this podcast. So, honestly, I think I love my company, and I'm very proud of it, and I support all the decisions they make. I wouldn't have a problem being an official spokesperson for it, but again, I prefer to have this flexibility that I have and try to stay under the radar. And I just think it's more useful for me and for you that I continue to do this kind of arrangement. And they compensate me well for doing my job. And my job is not to do social media, new media, podcasts, videos. My job at Acme is to fly airplanes and to do it professionally and give the customers the best service that I can possibly give. So, thanks, Brad, for your comments. And Brad's son, whatever your name is, hello. Captain Jeff says hi. And if I'm ever flying a jet out of MSP and you see me up there, please come up there and we'll have a nice little talk. Okay, let's see. Anything else I want to... Oh, just quickly, Peter chimed in, said that he was in the middle of listening to episode 83, and I was reading some feedback about Ryanair, everyone's favorite airline. He's being sarcastic. Now, first up, I'm not a paid spokesperson for the airline. However, I am sick to death of listening to people in the media go on and on about Ryanair like a broken record. Yes, Mr. O'Leary has a mouth, but how stupid do you have to be to take half of what he says seriously? There are two things Ryanair guarantee. Your ticket will be the cheapest, before optional extras like luggage, and your flight will be on time. What more can you ask for when traveling? If you don't like him or his airline, don't fly with him. No one's forcing you. I agree, and I think that the pilots there at Ryanair are just as good as any other airline, and I think you're right. I think Mr. O'Leary probably is very calculating in the way he presents himself and the things that he says. I think he's a very smart man, and I think being provocative in the airline industry has been a very beneficial thing for him and for his airline. Now, about the current fuel stinginess at Ryanair, the EU has set up guidelines for the minimum amount of extra fuel an aircraft must carry on every flight in case of diversions or unseen circumstance. Ryanair were following their law to a T. They were not breaking the law by taking too little fuel on board. They were taking the exact amount as needed. Now, what had they done wrong? The answer is, they're Ryanair. If such a story would have happened to British Airways, Virgin, or Air France, I assure you, you wouldn't have heard a word about it. This is Peter speaking, by the way. I've flown Ryanair many times and I've never been let down. Okay, you need to pay to check a bag, and if you want a snack, but hey, every legacy carrier in America is like that as well. That's right. So what's the difference? That's my point made. Anyway, it's time for me to step off my soapbox and continue listening to the rest of the episode. Peter. Thanks, Peter, for chiming in. And hey, that's what we're here for. Get it off your chest. And I don't think I've ever expressed anything negative. I've only read things on my podcast and read feedback from people saying some unfavorable things about Ryanair, but I've never, as far as I know, said anything about them myself, because honestly, I really can't, because I don't really have that much information, personal information about them or their pilots. I'm sure they're fine, and as I mentioned before, I think Michael O'Leary he knows what he's doing, and that's all I have to say about that. Okay, I was going to play a little sound clip there, but I just noticed I have not reconnected my iPad. It was running out of power, so I had to... Here we go. And pardon the interruption. Here we go. Yes, it's now turning into a 2.5-hour podcast.
I'm not a smart man.
I'm not. Okay. Quickly, Zach Rizzoldi in Columbia, Maryland just wanted to pass along this article about the Air India. I should have played this. That was a little Indian clip, I think. It sounds Indian to me. By the way, had some great Indian food last night. My co-pilot and I went over to little place, Indian restaurant. Excellent Indian cuisine. I had the Malai kofta, something like that. Great vegetarian Indian entree. And my first officer had the chicken tikka marsala. And the night before that, I went out with some friends of mine that I know from the StarQuest Production Network. And we went to a Vietnamese restaurant and had some really good Vietnamese cuisine. So it's been a very ethnic cuisine kind of trip, which I love. Okay, just wanted to pass along this article about the Air India Dreamliner landing with a huge 8x4 panel missing from the fuselage. Since I haven't seen it in any of the mainstream media or on Aviation Herald, he sent me a link. I did see it somewhere too, Zach. Yeah, like a huge, that's like a 4x8. That's the size of a piece of plywood or a drywall, right? Big chunk of the airplane skin fell off, like in the underneath the bottom area, kind of between the landing gear and that area, I think, of the fuselage. Don't know if they ever figured out what happened there or what happened to it. Hopefully it fell out over the water and didn't hit anybody. He says, while I'm at it, I have a question for you. I've been looking back through some of my grandfather's old pictures from when he flew with Pan Am. I've been struck by an enormous nostalgia for the golden romance age of aviation. If I wanted to try to find a small taste of this, what carrier in the world do you think comes closest? Wow. Which carrier do I find would be the closest to the romantic era of flying? I don't know. Maybe Singapore. Maybe I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. Maybe Aeroflot. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience flying with many other carriers, so I don't know which one would be the one that would be most like maybe the old days, the golden years of flying. Oops, sorry. Maybe if you're listening, you'll have an idea for Zach. Also, I think it would be neat for an airline to host a flight or two in the theme of older aviation. Maybe have the customers dress up in their Sunday best, along with the crew bringing out some nostalgic uniforms. Just a thought. I'd pay to do it. I would love to do that. I mean, actually, the airline that I wear, the uniform I wear for the airline for which I fly is a very classic uniform. It's basically the same pilot uniform that has been in existence. I am tired and I can't speak straight anymore. Basically, the airline that I'm flying for, the pilot uniform that I wear, is almost identical to the pilot uniform that was originally used when the airline began back in the 30s, I think, 1930s. The insignia has changed a little bit, the logo on the wings and that kind of thing, but for the most part, it's the same. So it would be easy for the pilots at Acme to dress up like the old days. The flight attendant uniforms have changed quite a bit, different uniforms over the years. That's a good idea. I know that some airlines paint their airplanes in the retro paint schemes, and I love seeing those. That's really cool. Okay, thanks for all the effort you put into the podcast, and keep it up. Thanks, Zach. I wish I could just do this stuff faster so I could catch up with all this great feedback. We're almost there here. We're almost there. Let's see. You know what? I'm going to do this one last one here because she sent this into the podcast a while back. I want to make sure I get this before we end this episode of the Airline Pilot Guy. And I know many of you have also sent me feedback, almost a month old. I'll get to it, I promise. If I don't do it on the show, I'll personally answer your feedback through email. Or maybe even an audio and send it to you personally. Your own personal podcast. Hey, that might be worth something. Not. Okay, Anissa writes, greetings from the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area. Hope you can come visit us soon. Me too. I love the Bay Area. I really do. That's one of my favorite parts of the country, Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Okay, you've talked a bit about airline uniforms. Oh, hey, the same thing we were just talking about. And I've been wondering, what is the uniform for the female pilots in your airline? Okay, it's basically the same, sort of the same uniform we have, a little bit more of a feminine cut. The jacket, I think, is still a double-breasted jacket and slacks, and I think they wear a blouse, not a pilot shirt, and I think they don't wear a regular straight black tie. They wear I think they have the option of wearing like a different, I don't know if you call it a tie or it's not a bolo, but it's like a shortened version of a black tie. I don't know what to call it. Sorry. The hat, they can wear the standard pilot hat, the one I wear. Back there, you can see it. I don't know if you ever notice, if you're watching the video, I try to put my captain's hat somewhere in the background, and you'll see it in different places in the various videos. But so the female pilots can wear that same type of hat, or they can wear a different one that's more female. It's different. In other words, if I wore one of the female pilot hats, I'd look like an idiot. Well, I already do look like an idiot, but I would even look more like an idiot. It's hard to describe. It just looks a little bit different shape to it. But they can wear the regular one as well. So bottom line, the female pilots at Acme wear a uniform very similar to the uniform that the males do. Okay. Also, I know you don't fly for Southwest Airlines, but maybe a Southwest Airlines pilot is listening and can answer this question. Okay. Southwest Airlines pilot persons, listen to this question from Anissa. I see Southwest Airlines pilots wearing some pretty funny ties or fun ties sometimes. I've always wondered, what fun ties do the female pilots get to wear? And then she says, I'm only halfway kidding about that question. I don't think it's a dumb question, actually. I would imagine they get to wear the same fun ties that the guys do. At Acme, we get to wear fun ties as well during the holidays. It's clearly delineated in our operations manual. From this date to this date, you may wear a Christmas tie, and from this date to this date, you may wear a patriotic tie. And in the month of October, for breast cancer awareness, you may wear a very, very bright pink, hot pink tie. And then any other time of the year, we're not supposed to wear a fun tie. So it has to be approved by management. Let's see, a more serious question. I've been wondering for a long time, what is so magic about 10,000 feet? Oh, Anissa, 10,000 feet is so magic. Think about it. 10,000 feet. Just rolls off the tongue. No, I don't know why 10,000 feet is so magic. Some guy said, you know what, below a certain altitude, we need to make sure that everybody has a sterile cockpit, and they don't talk unless it's essential conversation, and everybody's got to turn off their electronic devices, of course, until now, because below a certain altitude, I don't know, what do you think? 5, 10, 15? What do you think? Let's make it 10. Okay, 10,000 it is. That's how they came up with it, I think. That was a reenactment. Okay, going back to Anissa's feedback. I'm guessing the captain and first officer have to maintain a sterile cockpit until 10,000 feet, below 10,000 feet. Yes, we're supposed to. And of course, those of us in the back of the bus have to keep our electronics off until 10,000 feet. Not anymore. What is it about 10,000 feet? I don't know. Is that the altitude you want to be in? One of the things about 10,000 feet is that's also the altitude that the FAA has chosen in the United States of America to be the altitude where below that altitude you don't go any faster than 250 knots. So speed is restricted. The closer you get to the ground, I guess they want you to be a little bit slower, easier for the air traffic controllers to control you, and just more manageable that way. And then above 10,000 feet, what the heck, you guys are high enough, you're not going to bother anything. Go as fast as you darn want. I don't know. Again, I'm guessing. What is it about? Let's see. Is that the altitude you want to be at in order to be able to return to your departure airport in case of a problem? Not necessarily. Why that particular altitude? I don't know. And another thing, is it 10,000 feet AGL or MSL? This is a good question. If it's MSL, that only gives you 5,000 feet or so of clearance above the ground when taking off from Denver or Albuquerque. Safe and smooth flying to you, Anissa. A CAGA pilot, California General Aviation Pilot, and flying nut. Okay, thank you, Anissa, for your questions. So many in there. I don't know where to start. Yes. I don't know, because in the regulations it just says 10,000 feet. It does not say 10,000 AGL. It does not say 10,000 MSL, mean sea level. So here's the deal. You're flying into, as you mentioned, Denver, 5,280 feet or whatever it is, 5,000 something feet, into El Paso, which is like that high or higher. You're a lot closer to the ground when you're at 10,000 feet. Do you turn off your electronic devices at 15,000 MSL to add that extra 5,000 feet? Do you wait till you're above 15,000 feet leaving Denver on the way to Atlanta before you do the double ding? I do, but it's not really written anywhere what if it's AGL or MSL. So what I do, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong about that, as far as the double ding, the electronic devices and such, I always try to make it 10,000 feet above the ground. So when I'm leaving Denver, this is just me, I don't know if it's written anywhere in our regulations. When I'm leaving Denver, when I get above 10,000 feet, MSL, 5,000 feet above the ground, I'll start accelerating to above 250 knots. But I'll wait another few thousand feet before I do the double no smoking light to indicate electronic devices, or what we used to indicate electronic devices. So that's just me, I guess. Maybe others do it differently. But if you have a definitive answer out there, if you're listening and you're going, oh, Captain Jeff, you're an idiot, again, it's clearly 10,000 MSL, or it's clearly 10,000 AGL. I don't know. Good question, though. And I actually did go and look it up again, Anissa, and it's cleverly left out as far as what I could tell in the regulations. So, safe and smooth flying to you, Anissa, and say hello to Jeff for me. And that is going to do... Oh, one last thing. Just wanted to... the 10,000 feet thing reminded me of something, and you mentioned something about returning. We were leaving Minneapolis-St. Paul today, heading down here to Tampa. And on takeoff, we had a jump seater from American Airlines traveling with us. It was full in the back, and so this lady had to sit in the jump seat with us in the front. And when we were, before we pushed back, close the door, and you push in the middle of the door. It's kind of like a bifold door, just to make sure it's locked. Nobody can get in. And at first it wasn't quite locked. It kind of popped open again. And so we closed it again, pushed against the door, and yeah, it seems like the door is locked. And so we take off and we rotate, and shortly after we're off the ground, we hear this boom, the door opening. And it was not my leg, it was my first officer's leg. And I just turned around and I looked at him and said, "You keep flying." And I looked at the jump seater was looking at me, and she's going like, "Should I get up and close it?" And I said, "Nope, don't do anything. Everything's fine. Right now the most important thing is flying the airplane." And so nothing bad is going to happen. In fact, if somebody from the back wanted to get up into the cockpit at that point, I don't think they could, because you're on the airplane that I fly, our initial climb rate or deck angle is like 20 degrees nose high. So it would be quite a feat to go uphill and into the cockpit with the deck angle at 20 degrees nose high. And then, of course, when we get above 1,000 feet, we start lowering the pitch to accelerate. And again, I said, let's not worry about it right now. I said, if anybody tries to close the door right now, just the most important thing is make sure you don't put your fingers in between the door and the jamb, because you're going to at least break your finger, and the worst, probably decapitate. No, not decapitate. Basically chop off your finger, because it's a very heavy door, and it's not a good thing when you get your fingers stuck in there. So we got above 10,000 feet. Again, the deck angle of the airplane comes down. We're accelerating now from out of 250 knots to something like around 320 knots. At this point, the jump seater said, "Should I try to close it now?" And I said, "Yeah, you can go ahead and try to close it now." And she couldn't. And the flight attendant back there was trying to push it closed, and she couldn't get it closed. And so, the whole time the door is open, and I'm sure that, I know everybody in first class could see that some kind of commotion was going on. The door was open. If you were anywhere in the airplane and near an aisle seat, you could look down the aisle or up the aisle and see that the cockpit door was open, and there were people standing up there trying to get the door closed. It was quite a commotion, actually. And then my first officer said, "Hey, Jeff, let me see if I can close it." I went, "Okay, go ahead." I had the airplane, I had the radios. So I'm flying the airplane, and he's getting up out of his seat, and the jump seater's standing up, and the flight attendant's there, and they're all shaking the door and banging on it and everything else. And I'm talking on the radio, flying the airplane, thinking, "Oh, please, please, please get the door closed, because if we can't close the door, we're not going to be able to go to Tampa. We're going to have to turn around and land, and we're going to be delayed probably at least an hour while they fix the door." And so Jay gets back in the seat, and he goes, "It's stuck. It's like over center. It's just jammed. I can't get it, to close." And he goes, "Do you want to try it?" And I was just about to say, "No, let's just go back." And then I thought, well, okay, let me give it a shot. And so I said, "You have the airplane, you have the radios," and then Nancy, the lead flight attendant, said, "Do you want me to see if I can get somebody in first class, maybe a bigger guy, a stronger guy to help us with this?" I said, yeah, sure. So one of the gentlemen in first class came up, and I said, "Okay, this is where you need to push on it." And our jump seater, Teresa, was kind of pushing up against the ceiling to try to get, to relieve some of the pressure on the hinge. And he was pushing with all his might on the other side, and I was trying to guide the door from, my angle inside the cockpit, and voila, we got it unstuck. Thank goodness, because, again, we would have had taken a pretty big delay to go back and refuel and get maintenance to come out there, and then all the paperwork, and it would have been a mess. So, yes, we got the door closed, and we continued on our merry way. And so, once we got up to cruise altitude, I told Jay, I said, "Look, you have the radios, the airplane, and I'm going to, make my PA right now, and I'll try to explain what the heck that was going on." And so I explained the whole commotion about the door and everything else. And yeah, that was it. It was a pretty uneventful flight after that. So just thought I'd share that with you, that sometimes odd things happen, and I wouldn't say that this was necessarily a safety thing or an unsafe thing. It was just one of those things where, hey, for our protection, we need to have that door closed, and if we can't get it closed, then we got to go back. So it worked out, a happy ending. So thanks again for listening to this week's Airline Pilot Guy Show. And don't forget to vote for the podcast if you're so inclined. You can do that by going over to podcastawards.com. I'll have a link in the show notes. You can listen to me by going to iTunes and subscribing there. Thanks to all of you who have given me a review on iTunes. It really helps kind of push my podcast up and get more listeners. So you can go over there and subscribe via iTunes. There's a link in the show notes for that. Again, thank you for your kind reviews. If you want to listen to the show on the airlinepilotguy.com site, you're more than welcome to do that. If you want to watch the YouTube video, there's also a link right there on the particular episode on airlinepilotguy.com to watch it there. Or you can just subscribe to my YouTube channel if you'd rather do that. So many ways, just so many ways. Stitcher Radio, if you want to listen to me in your car on your Stitcher Radio, you can do that. And if you don't have the app already, you can do that by going to stitcher.com/airlinepilot. Don't put the guy on there for some reason. I don't know. So again, Stitcher Radio, stitcher.com/airlinepilot. And all this information is in my show notes on airlinepilotguy.com, including how you can send me feedback. So remember, don't send me too much because I'm still trying to catch up. And until next time, hope you have a great week, great weekend, and wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Good day.